Today on the 10-12 podcast, myself, Jamie, and Andy are recapping Week 5 in the Big 12 with help from our good friend Scott from Boscoe's Boys. We are going to talk Iowa State. You're welcome, Cyclone fans, on the Wide Right Natty Light Discord channel. Plus, Scott gets Andy to admit that he was wrong, and we're going to talk about some potential Big 12 championship game matchups because the standings in the conference are absolutely wild.
A magia do futebol. Somos diferentes, mas torcer nos faz parecidos. Não importa se você assiste com a camisa da sorte, no bar com amigos ou em casa na poltrona.
Preparou, vai bater, pegou!
Se você é o que grita mais alto, o que só comemora depois do replay, cada um torce do seu jeito. Coca-Cola. Torcer é pra todos.
Tá a fim de ver os grandes craques do futebol europeu? Tá com aquela vontade de ver um golaço? Um clássico do futebol inglês ou El Clássico espanhol? A gente tá contigo e com o Vini Júnior, o Haaland, o Mbappé e muito mais. O Disney Plus tá com tudo e o melhor futebol do mundo tá no Disney Plus. Assista ao futebol europeu ao vivo no Disney Plus.
Welcome to the 10-12, the podcast that covers all 16 teams in the Big 12 Conference. We are the flagship show of the 10-12 Network. Find every show on the network at 1012network.com, TEN the number 12, the word network. And we are partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip Slavin. Thank you for joining us on this Monday or Tuesday when you're listening to this, or maybe Wednesday or Thursday. Maybe it's just taking you a while to get around to it. I don't care when you listen. I just appreciate that you do. If you like what you hear, do us a favor. Leave us a 5-star rating. If you're an iTunes listener, if you're a YouTube listener, leave us a review. We would appreciate it. You know, you can leave comments on episodes in Spotify as well. Just go in there and be like, done. Just real quick. We would appreciate it. Shout out to the fourth Bass brother on iTunes who had given us a 5-star review previously, and then bumped it down to 1 because of a guest we brought on. Changed his review to updated back to 5. It's a 5-star review again. He dropped it on Thursday. It says, updated back to 5 stars. I'll keep it here as long as hack guests aren't brought back. The Gambling Picks episode is too good to stay mad at the show. If you are the fourth Bash brother, 1012podcast@gmail.com. That's the email. Please send me a list of hack guests so I can be sure to know who not to bring on the show moving forward. That would be great. It is. Andy made this joke before, so I'm going to give him credit. But podcasting is like college football. You just got to keep re-recruiting your fans every single episode, and you hope they don't come asking for a bigger payday 3 weeks in when you're 3-0. To which you're going to tell them, see ya. Joining me today, as they do every Monday, she is the vibe queen of the 10-12 podcast, the 10-12 network. She is the voice of Drake, soccer, and volleyball. And of course, Iowa State women's basketball. She is JSJ Jamie Steyer-Johnson.
She is somewhat distracted. It's halftime right now of the first semifinal game for the Minnesota Lynx, but they're going to be playing here shortly. And so when I inevitably lose what little focus I have to begin with, you'll just have to forgive me. But hey, we're coming off of a 3-0 weekend on broadcast, 3-0 sweeps twice by volleyball, and a 3-0 win for soccer. Big weekend for the Bulldogs. And we're just rolling right along, man. Time is ticking away. It's still 80 degrees in Iowa. I don't know where I'm going with this, but things are happening.
I love it. I love to hear things are happening. Things are moving right along. There's a fly in the room in here right now, and it is the loudest fly ever. And I doubt any of you can hear it, but I can. And you know what that's like to be trapped in a room with a noisy fly. You do. Speaking of being trapped in a room with a noisy fly, also joining us is Andy.
I was gonna say my joke to that was gonna be the only thing louder than a noisy fly trapped in the room is the chorus of KU fans yelling "Fire Jeff Grimes." So,
well, that for good reason. For good reason. We'll get to that. I'm sorry. It was just there. Like, it was just laying there.
It was.
I had to. I'm sure our guest who will come up in the second half of the show, Scott Wildcat of Boscoe's Boys, will appreciate that joke. I look forward to Andy and Scott's banter. Hopefully there's enough room built in for all of it. We have some football to get to. The Big 12 is absolutely wild. It is wide open. It is nuts. And it's, the standings. You look at the Big 12 standings, it's exactly like we all thought it would be heading into the season. It's sitting at 2-0 in conference play right now are BYU, Colorado, and Texas Tech. Yep. Just like we all drew it up.
Yeah,
just like we all drew it up. Absolutely. Okay. My point from 2 weeks ago of there will be 2 first-time participants in the Big 12 championship game is still holding fairly strong. Fairly strong. We have a lot of football to go to. All right, we got to get through some games. We got to roll through some things. We are going to start with the Iowa State Cyclones today. Why? Because I feel like I've gotten some pushback from Iowa State fans, specifically over there in the Wide Right 90 Light Discord. Love you guys. Keep chatting with us. And if you haven't joined it, you should. About the way we've talked about their team on the show. Mind you, they have already had an idle week. We've had some limited opportunities to actually talk about them, but they've got 4 games under their belt now, including a Big 12 game, so we've got plenty to talk about. So, Iowa State 20, Houston 0. We'll start with the Iowa State side. I was listening to Split Zone Duo this week, as I always do. Well, mostly do. And they made the point that Arkansas State held out a lot of the guys, of their players, against Iowa State because they were more worried about conference play and knew they were going to get their tails whipped by the Cyclones. So I take that and the performance against Houston, and frankly, the other 3 games we've seen from the offense this season, and I come away believing that we have not really seen the best from this offense yet. Yes, it looks awesome against Arkansas State, but I don't feel like we've seen the best from this Iowa State offense against a team that actually tried to come on the field and play them. I'm still waiting to see that. And I don't know any Iowa State fans who are like, no, this Iowa State offense is clicking, firing all cylinders. It's not yet. But it's okay. It has time to figure that out because the defense remains awesome despite some of the injuries they've had at linebacker. And is not only going to win a few, 1 or 2.
Nothing. Shit. Shoot.
WNBA playoff Jamie is a whole nother level.
Eek JSJ. That's all I have to say.
Not only does the Iowa State defense going to win games for the Cyclones, that we have seen them do, they're going to give Iowa State a shot in every single game left on the schedule. And I don't just mean give them a shot. I mean, the defense is good enough, even with the injuries, for the Cyclone team to find a way to go undefeated. I said it. I'm not saying they're going to. I'm saying the defense is good enough that if the offense does start rolling, just go ahead and pencil in Iowa State to Arlington. There's a lot of games left to play. Okay, I'm allowed to make statements after week 5 and not be held to them like they are written in gospel. But I am just going to say that about Iowa State at this point. As for Houston, Cougars are shut out for a second straight week in a row. I continue to be impressed by Houston's defense. The offense remains bad. I believe Willie Fritz had a comment after the game where they had multiple different receivers run the wrong routes when they were the first read. Woof. What's the line from Home Alone? Your girlfriend. Woof. That's looking at the Houston offense on a regular basis. Andy?
I was going to say, to be honest, it's convinced me more and more that Dana just didn't care at the end of his tenure there. This doesn't feel like it's a Willie Fritz is, making too complicated of an offense for them or anything like that. It's more of a, they honestly just don't know what they're doing. That program was in shambles. I'm shocked that they were able to beat West Virginia that that final year of last season. But Houston deserves so much better, and we'll see. Like it's going to take time. Having been there as a Kansas fan, I know completely that it sucks, but you look like you actually have some hope moving forward. So, but yeah, I mean, Iowa State, it's impossible at this point to find anything wrong at all with this team. Like,
hold on.
I'm sorry. It's impossible to look at anything there and say this is a big issue for them this year. Like everything that you can point to is either very nitpicky, or it's more of an incomplete because like, yeah, they struggled a little bit for a while against Iowa. They had some issues in that first week with the offense, but since then they've actually shown that offense is actually, it actually has some life. So it's like any kind of criticism you can have of this Iowa State team, I don't think you can point to enough evidence for me to say that, yeah, for sure, that's actually an issue. It's more of that could be an issue, but I don't think we know enough yet to be sure.
Jamie?
I got to watch the second half, which was the half worth watching from my understanding. So that panned out really well. Actually, okay, I got home. I listened to a little bit of the first half in my car on my way home from volleyball. And then I got home and I watched maybe the last 30 seconds. And then it was halftime. And no, I watched the last 3 minutes maybe on TV. I don't know. I'm losing my timeline because here's the important part. I got home, I ate dinner while watching, and then I went and I got ice cream. So I went and I got ice cream during halftime. And when I went in to get ice cream, the person in front of me and the people that walked in behind me had Iowa State shirts on. And so I said, so we all decided halftime was the time to get ice cream, huh? And the people that walked in behind me, the wife said, actually, we went to the park because they pointed at their kid because he really wanted to go to the park. So don't tell him anything. He has the game paused at home and he's going to catch up. And so I didn't say anything because my response was going to be, well, you didn't miss much, but I didn't want to put that thought in the guy's head. Anyway, I got my ice cream. I went home and then I watched the second half. And that was the part that was worth watching. And that was very fun. And it was also good ice cream. Shout out to Billy's.
All right. Clip it. Post it. Moving on. BYU 34, Baylor 28. BYU went up 21-0 and 28-7 and then hung on as Baylor slowly chipped away on the lead. Bears had a couple of chances late to potentially take the lead in this game, ending their final two drives with a turnover on downs at the BYU 24 and an interception at their own 29. From the Baylor side, I mean, you want to give the Bears credit for fighting back in the game. I don't feel like they've quit on Dave Aranda. But it's hard. You can't have moral victories at this point. There's no moral victories when your head coach is on the hot seat and the seat just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Dave Aranda is at this point on his third set of coordinators, 3-16 in his last 19 against FBS opponents, 0-9 in his last 9 against P4 teams at home. And by the way, he said he was really happy with Tuesday's practice. So, yeah. Do I think this is a better Baylor team than last year's Baylor team? Yes. Does that matter at this point? No.
Not at all.
No.
I'm going to be honest. I watched this game because it was the game on before my game started. And man, BYU jumped out to such a huge lead. I mean, they were up 31-14 at halftime. It was basically over at that point. You could tell. It didn't seem like Baylor was actually in the game at all. That final touchdown just kind of seemed like it was BYU. Yeah, fine, go ahead and score. And then BYU went full turtle mode in the second half. Only scored 3 points in the second half. And it became a game again. But that felt a lot more to me like BYU stopped doing the things that made them successful in the first half more than Baylor, stopped letting or made them go away from them. Not to say that, so I mean, I do think that this is a BYU team that is significantly better than anyone gave them credit for coming into the year. I mean, I think that at this point that's a given. I still think that based off of what I've seen, there's maybe some potential worries about whether they can keep it up through the more difficult stretch, of what they have in their schedule. But I mean, they beat K-State at home and they demolished K-State at home. So, if you still think that K-State's up at the top of the conference, which I do, BYU is a serious contender for the Big 12. And I don't think this changed anything. This was more of a reminder that no matter who you are or how good you are, you cannot go to sleep on the road and expect to win a game.
unless you're on the road in Waco, in which case you probably can. Yeah.
Well, no, or you build up, a 24-point lead.
Yes. Look, they're 5-0, but the schedule's gonna get interesting now. Obviously, they've already beaten Kansas State, Provo at night, Arizona, OSU at UCF at Utah, Kansas at Arizona State versus Houston. So again, I don't know how high the ceiling is for this BYU team. This isn't. I almost want to say, from a narrative standpoint, it's reminding me a little bit of the Kansas team from 2 years ago that started off 5-0 and super hot. We were super excited, and they got to a bowl game, right? And I think if this BYU team does that, like based off preseason expectations, I think that's a good thing. I don't think BYU fans will be thrilled about that given the start of this season. And I'm going to listen to the Give 'em Hell podcast Give 'em Hell Brigham, because our boys' Hype Train podcast hasn't posted yet. They'll post midweek. And it was very much like phew, that was the vibes. The vibes I've gotten from that and from BYU fans were like, phew, we survived. Like, not going to come away from this game like, aha. It's more like, okay, we got it. Let's move on to next week. Let's get ready for a game against Arizona at home. In a game that, we hope to continue this streak, even though Arizona's coming off a win. We'll talk about Arizona in a minute. Speaking of Kansas, TCU 38, Kansas 27. TCU social media.
Hey, I think JSJ has something that
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
You thought that was all I had?
No, I don't. Go ahead, please.
Fair, but look.
In my defense, go.
I got up. I watched some football. And I watched the first half of Kansas State and Oklahoma State.
Why?
And then I switched over. That was a good half. I switched over because BYU Baylor came back first from halftime. And that ended up being exactly the move. And so I don't have anything to add analysis-wise, but I want credit for watching the games and enjoying it.
I love it. We're on a, try to get through everything in 30 minutes, and we had to stop everything so JSJ could relate her viewing experience.
No. Jamie is welcome to say whatever. If she wants to go off on a tangent about ice cream at
That's
halftime,
fair.
Jamie can
say
whatever she wants.
That was a worthwhile tangent, and I kept this one brief.
No, I keep forgetting JSJ is the real talent here. So
again, vibe queen. Okay.
How does one forget?
Vibe queen. TCU 38, Kansas 27. TCU social media team is savage. They are absolutely savage. The tweet was a very TCU video after the win with a very simple message: 1 month till hoops.mp4.
Yeah.
It was. I'm sorry. It was good. There was TCU social media team continues to just run on all cylinders, and they take their lumps because when you beat TCU, you get to throw TCU style videos at them, and then when TCU wins, they get to continue that trend. TCU came in 15th in the Big 12 in rushing yards per game, yards per carry, at an astonishingly bad 3 yards per carry. They had 153 yards on 4.6 yards per carry against Kansas. The run worked. This didn't come across as a game where it's like, Kansas should have won this if only Jaden Daniels hadn't turned the ball over multiple times. I mean, he did have an interception, but this just felt like a game where...
Right. That interception was a, really long pass on the very last offensive play of the game for the Jayhawks. So, it doesn't even... it technically counts, but it didn't really play into the to the result at all. And look, Lance Leipold went off on the officials after this game because they were horrible. It was bad. And yes, TCU benefited the most from them, but it wasn't strictly like Kansas getting screwed. And Kansas definitely deserved to lose this game. They didn't play well enough to win, even if the officials had called it perfectly. The result might have been different, though. This was one that, despite the fact that Kansas played as poorly as they did, and the officials were as awful as they were, Kansas, lost this one by 2 scores, and were just as maddeningly frustrating for Kansas fans as they've been all year long. This did not feel any different than any of the prior 3 games. It's just the offense, again, I said this over on the Rock Chalk podcast. If you guys have listened to that already, I apologize for making the same point here, but I think it's that important. It seems like Jeff Grimes is really good at drawing up a script. And then once you get off script, he has no clue what he's doing or how to maintain momentum. Kansas, in their first 15 plays of the game, they had 125 yards in 2 drives, scored 2 touchdowns. After that, in the first half, again, 15 plays, 25 yards rest of the half. It was atrocious. It was awful. I don't know what is going on. And Kansas had a decent number of defensive players missing, including Cornell Wheeler, who is the green dot, like the most important like quarterback of the defense. But it was still not a good excuse for the missed tackles. You cannot leave your feet when you're trying to make an open field tackle one-on-one. It just doesn't work. This was as disappointing of a game as I've seen in a really long time, because Kansas did just as much to shoot themselves in the foot as TCU was able to take advantage of it. And credit to TCU for taking advantage of it. Talked with a few TCU people that I know that were covering the game as well, and as they put it, it's just their luck that TCU was able to win this game and make people think that this TCU team is actually okay, because they are well aware of some significant issues that TCU has as well. I think really what we've done at this point is that TCU has staved off the inevitable, seasons over what the heck is going on. Maybe they can keep staving it off through the rest of the year, but there's definitely, I think, some big concerns. Well, for Kansas, for sure, going bowling at this point. Like, you went from being a Big 12 contender to, are they even going to make a bowl? And I think TCU is kind of in the same boat that, yeah, they're close enough now where you feel like maybe you can make a bowl, but I don't know that any of their games so far give you the confidence that they're definitely going to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay, just making sure. To play the schedule game, which, looking at TCU's schedule the rest of the way, Houston at home, Texas Tech at home, at Baylor, OSU at home. Who knows what Arizona will play like at home? Who knows if Cam Rising will be back when the road game at Utah? Like, I would pick at this point TCU to make a bowl game, but we shall see.
But it's going to be close.
Kansas? No.
Yeah.
No.
It's theoretically possible, but I wouldn't bet on it anymore.
They are not eliminated from bowl contention with a
Exactly.
1-4 record. But no. Okay.
Desde 2019, a Toyota vem acelerando o futuro, produzindo no Brasil o primeiro híbrido flex do mundo. De lá pra cá, as coisas mudaram. Muitos entraram na tendência que a gente criou. Mas sabe o que não mudou? A confiança do brasileiro na Toyota, que não veio da noite pro dia. Toyota, no futuro há muito tempo. Paz no trânsito começa por você.
Yeah. The weirdest. What just happened? Occurrence of the weekend in the Big 12. Colorado 48, UCF 21. Colorado forced 4 turnovers, including the absolutely incredible interception by Travis Hunter, who just keeps making ridiculous plays on offense and defense. That guy should be the Heisman favorite, the Heisman frontrunner. I don't care what anybody else is doing. I don't care what Colorado's 4-1 right now, so let's not act like it's still he's on a bad team. They're 4-1. I don't care. Travis Hunter, Heisman favorite, Heisman frontrunner. Okay, so 4 turnovers. That's crazy. You're not going to win games with 4 turnovers, but that is not the most staggering and shocking part of what happened on Saturday. What is Colorado averaging 4.4 yards per carry and holding UCF to just 4 yards per carry. Colorado averaged more yards per carry on the ground than UCF. UCF's whole offense is built on being this incredible rushing machine. Colorado can't run the ball and doesn't choose to run the ball. Colorado went to the bounce house and put it on UCF. And it wasn't close. Colorado got a big and just kept use. It's like those cartoons where the tall guy's holding put his hand out on the head of a smaller guy trying to hit him, and his swings are all coming up just short because he's a little guy. That's what it looked like in that game, which is an absolutely astonishing thing to have seen happen between UCF and Colorado. I don't know what to take away from this game from either team. Like, at this point, it's just time to say, like, okay, I guess Colorado's a good team. Like, I have to start giving them a little bit more credit than we wanted to, and UCF still got that in them. And I don't know if it's a Gus thing. I don't know what it is, but like I thought maybe this year they would avoid stuff like that. It felt like with the way they came back on TCU, they would. It felt like with the way again, I know the non-conference schedule was. The first few were not that good. They've got Florida next week, but the way UCF started the season, I felt pretty good. I did not see that kind of a performance coming. It was atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've learned is that, and I'll be the first to admit, I was completely wrong on Colorado. I mean, the one thing that I had said was they're either going to be a really good team or a really bad team. And I think what we've seen is that it's all coming together. It seems to be now, granted, I do think that there's definitely some schedule stuff related to that's made that a little bit better for them. But UCF, I think, honestly, I think my bigger takeaway here is UCF. The fact that, they needed that monumental comeback against TCU, very, very reminiscent of the Baylor win against UCF last year. Like that's what that game was. And then this one kind of showed that, hey, they still have some fairly significant issues. I mean, two interceptions for KJ Jefferson is not great. You look at this team. I mean, they had 2 fumbles that they lost, one from KJ Jefferson, one from RJ Harvey, the 2 guys that are supposed to be able to lead this team on the ground as well. So it was just complete start to finish, awful from UCF. Obviously, it's a muted level of awful from some of the other teams in the Big 12, and I think UCF is still going to have some success in the Big 12 this year. But I think this is the kind of game that makes you wonder: is it realistic to think that they could stay in contention through halfway through conference season? Because I think that there's plenty of other teams on their schedule that can take these same sort of issues and exploit them.
I thought that on College Game Day, Miss Terry calling out Nick Saban for not picking Colorado because Dion had texted him and said nice things about him on College Game Day was really funny. And then her picking him and beating Saban in picks. She was 7-2 and he was 5-4. I thought that every single moment of that was terrific, especially because in the 1 year that he was at Toledo, I to this day hear such great things about especially Miss Terry. And so shout out to that. I love it. That's gold.
Gold is correct. All right. Texas Tech 44, Cincinnati 41. Shout out to Baron Morton, who on Saturday became the first Texas Tech quarterback to start the first 5 games of a season since Nick Shimonek in 2017. So, knock on wood. No, I'm just not even saying it. I'm just going to say shout out to him for starting 5 games. There's a question in there. We could ask it, but I'm not going to ask it because it feels like that would just jinx the whole situation. So we're just gonna congratulate Texas Tech for pulling off the win over Cincinnati, and it was a fun game. It was a fun game, back and forth. Cincinnati had a shot to tie it at the end, missed a very long field goal in the final play of the game, and at this point, Texas Tech is figuring some things out. Defense, still a little bit suspect. And Cincinnati looks like a competent football team in year 2 for Scott Satterfield. So I have to say something nice since I've trashed that hire the whole time. I'll say something nice. Cincinnati looks like a very competent football team so far this season. And Texas Tech's 2-0 in conference play.
Yeah, I mean, this is 2 teams that I think most people had kind of, had for the most part written off. I think there were people that thought that Texas Tech could be good this year, but they've looked a lot better, I think, than a lot of people expected. And it's very curious to see these sorts of performances. The fact, though, that is the biggest stat to come out of this game, right, is in terms of number of consecutive starts at the beginning of a season by the same quarterback. That's not great. So, I mean, look, Texas Tech has plenty of options. It seems like things are finally starting to come together. But this is also a team, I think, that's taken some spectacular dives at inopportune times. And this is the Big 12. The Big 12 is weird. It's going to continue to be weird. I doubt that Texas Tech is going to get inoculated from that weirdness for the rest of the year. That being said, they could also benefit from it. So I don't know what this means for the conference race, other than the fact that, hey, Texas Tech is, still right smack dab in the middle of it at 2-0. And it's not like you look at their schedule and immediately say, oh my gosh, they're going to have problems here. Sure. Maybe you wonder about going to Arizona, but then Baylor at TCU, that's 2 more games. You could be 4-1 in conference going into the back stretch. So kind of crazy the way that this Big 12 conference has already played out.
I'll say this on Tech. They're 3-0 in one-score games. And we say all the time, if you want to get to Arlington in the Big 12, you got to win your one-score games. They're 3-0 so far. It is still early in the season, but that is a good indicator. JSJ?
Yes.
Excellent.
I've got to go yell at the TV because that's
Because WNBA is back on, so
that's
we
gonna
understand.
make a pretty big difference. So I have to hold up my end of the bargain.
Fair.
All right.
You'll all know tomorrow when you listen to this whether I did enough. So questions, complaints can be directed to me on Twitter, I guess. All right. I'll talk to you all later. Have a great time.
JSTEYZ is where you can go tweet at Jamie. Jamie, we love you. We'll talk to you later. Speaking of things we love, Charlie Hustle. Sponsor here at the podcast, sponsor here on the entire 10-12 network, who loves the Big 12 and makes incredibly comfortable, incredibly cool, vintage inspired collegiate apparel. And they've got all 16 Big 12 teams covered. Y'all know them. Look, I gotta say this. Every podcast is someone's first. I'm finally getting that line out without completely butchering it. I think it took like 400 episodes to do it, but we got there. You know, sometimes it takes you a minute. This stuff is comfy. The stuff looks cool. I was wearing multiple shirts this weekend. I did a lot of things. And I had a couple of Charlie Hustle shirts on, and they were both fantastic. So do yourself a favor. Whatever Big 12 school you are a fan of, you need to add at least one Charlie Hustle shirt to your collection. So go to charliehustle.com. It's on sale. Throw it in the cart. You're set. Congrats. You want more than one, or it's not on sale. Use our promo code 101215 TEN1215 to get you 15% off all non-sale items. They've got great stuff. If you haven't been yet, I would assume if you've been on the show and you've been there. If you listen to this podcast, you've probably gone and checked it out. Maybe you didn't find something. I understand. But if you haven't checked it out yet, you've been like, I don't know. Maybe you're already starting to plan for Christmas. Maybe you're already starting to plan for the holidays, gifts you got to get for friends and family. Ain't nothing wrong with Charlie Hustle. You can get a gift card, or you can pick out the shirt for them because people enjoy opening a comfy gift on Christmas Day. So charliehustle.com, promo code 101215, 15% off all non-sale items. Charlie Hustle, vintage, made fresh.
Meu nome é Cairo Santos e eu sou o kicker e único brasileiro jogando na NFL. Cada chute, cada jarda conquistada, cada passo me levou para mais perto dos meus sonhos. Agora, a cada R$200 em compras com seu Visa cadastrado, você tem a chance de ficar mais perto do sonho de assistir ao Super Bowl 59. E usando o seu cartão de débito, você ainda concorre a prêmios diários de até R$1.000. Não importa o tamanho do seu sonho, dê o primeiro passo. Visa, apoiando seus passos aonde você quiser chegar.
Joining us for the back half of the show. I can't believe I did this. Not because I don't love this guest, but because I have allowed him and Andy to be here on the show at the same time. And I hope to God that the train stays on the tracks, or at least everyone is able to evacuate from it safely before the bridge collapses and it crashes down 1,000 feet into the river. He is Scott Wildcat of Boscoe's boys. Scott, welcome back, friend.
You muted me. You didn't want me crashing your guys' talk with Jamie before she left. I wanted to ask her about some of the recent blue chip K-State women's basketball recruits that we got, but I'll have to save that for another time. But no, I'm happy to be here, Phillip. It's been a productive Sunday. Woke up, took Chauncey on a walk, went to church, rewatched the game, recorded 2 episodes of my own, went on another podcast, watched the Chiefs win again. Haven't had a good night's sleep in going on 3 weeks, but if you ever ask me to come on this show, I will be here because this is my favorite Big 12 podcast, and anyone who is a Big 12 fan who doesn't listen to this, they're missing out. So thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it. You say such sweet and nice things. I love you. All right. Arizona 23, Utah 10. I'm going to be honest with y'all. We got the kids down. We eat dinner after the kids go down on Saturday. We went to bed at 8:30, and my wife woke me up at around 9:30 because I fell asleep. She woke me up to turn off the TV, and then I went back to sleep. And then I checked the game at one point because I had to take the dog out because he wanted to go outside. And then I checked the game again in the morning. And I didn't watch 1 second of this game. The outcome, let me say this. Having not seen the game, so I'm not going to sit here and spend a bunch of time and act like I know what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm going to take away from this. Arizona had 2 weeks to prepare. I wondered about this game when we made picks on Thursday. I will believe Cam Rising is going to play for Utah again this season when I actually see him on the field with a helmet on his head under center taking a snap. And until then, you got to be worried about Utah. Defense remains good, but that offense, it's going to win him some games. Especially when you play Alan Bowman. But when you play Noah Fafita, it's not going to be quite as good. And your offense doesn't get, 3/4 of the game clock out there to try and get opportunities to win the game for you. So, if you're Utah, you're worried. Because I think this is a more realistic view of Utah and the second half against Baylor than what happened in Stillwater last weekend. Andy?
So I actually watched. Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Scott. No.
Go ahead, Scott. Go.
I was going to say,
go, Scott.
I stayed up and watched 90% of it. I nodded off for a little bit, but only have a dog for responsibility. And, I was, sitting pretty high on my horse after, the game earlier in the day. So I loved watching that game. Look, that's exactly what Utah feared they were going to be without Cam Rising. That's exactly what a lot of us said Utah is going to be without Cam Rising. I picked that game outright on my own show. We only pick winners on my show so we can all have gaudy records, so we can trick people into thinking we know more than we actually do. But I did pick Arizona outright because, look, you still have Fafita, you still have T-Mac, and they did have those 2 weeks to prepare for it. And again, until I see Cam Rising go out there and actually take a snap, I'm operating under the, idea that he is not going to play. And look, Utah has a good defense, but not everyone can completely shut down Arizona playing them at home on a late night game under your own fans with the whole world watching. That takes a real quality defense like K-State. So,
oh man,
bravo, Dave. Bravo. No, that was
I knew exactly what was coming as he was getting ready to go there. So look, I have no room to talk about anything at all. Like, Scott, you get to have all of your comments because I can't argue with any of them at this point. But no, I mean, this was why I had picked out Cam Rising as the most critical player in the Big 12 this year coming in, because Utah was so dependent on Cam Rising. And this offense, I figured, was like, the only reason you felt any good about this offense was because they had Cam Rising coming back. It was very, very similar to a Jalen Daniels. Like, Kansas needed Jalen Daniels to come back and be super successful for for you to feel good about that offense. Utah, I think that's even more though with Cam Rising, because they don't have a running game that you can rely on to take over if your passing game isn't there. And that's what we're seeing here for Utah. Yeah, the defense is great, but they're going to take multiple losses the rest of this year if Cam Rising doesn't come back, because the offense is going to put that defense in bad situations, and the defense is not going to be able to last the entire game. I mean, a 10-3 halftime score, you have to feel pretty good as a Utah fan thinking, oh, our defense is going to win us this game. But then when the offense doesn't do anything until the end of the game, basically, the defense just couldn't keep it going the entire game. In the Big 12, the offenses are good enough. You are not going to stop a team from scoring for a full 60 minutes. You should plan on teams scoring an average of a touchdown a quarter. That's basically what happens in the Big 12. If you don't plan on that, or if you can't score that much, you have to have an elite defense. And I don't think Utah's defense is elite. I think it's very, very good. I think it's excellent, but I don't think it's quite at the level where it can carry a team like you need to if you have a quarterback that just can't do anything at all.
It's at this point, it's just wait and see for Cam Rising. Like, Utah's going to win some games, but Arlington is, if Cam Rising doesn't come back, this is just what bowl game is Utah going to this year. That's it. Because we saw this last year. Isaac Wilson is not Cam Rising. End of story. So we'll see how that goes.
I mean, the only thing that you can say, they have a 3-game stretch that is theoretically winnable, all 3 of them, at Arizona State in 2 weeks, and then TCU at home and at Houston. Again, assuming that Arizona State is not like a Colorado, much, much better than most people expected them to be this year. But like those are all at least theoretically winnable with the level of quarterback play you have. But once you get to that BYU game, you get to the Holy War. If you don't have Cam Rising back, it's really hard to think that you're going to win that game unless BYU falls flat on their face.
Yeah, I think it's a good call. All right. Kansas State 42, Oklahoma State 20. Cowboys scored a touchdown late, so just like last week, the game was not as close as the final score indicated. OSU's offense is not good. They're not good. They finally got Ollie going. Like, Ollie got running early. He had some good runs. He had some big chunk plays, and then they made some questionable play calling and wasted some early success and early opportunities. After the interception, the fact that they did nothing but a field goal because Casey Dunn decided to call back-to-back quarterback runs with Alan Bowman? Sure. Yeah. Oklahoma State had 5 first-half drives that reached Kansas State's 31 or better. They ended in field goal, missed field goal, touchdown, field goal, turnover. Luckily, none of that mattered because then they just got absolutely demolished in the second half. Levi from Wide Right 90 Light texted me in the second half and goes, quote, "I will never forgive Oklahoma State for giving Avery Johnson confidence." Farmageddon is incredible. It's incredible stuff.
By the way, Levi may not be the only one that's texting you that at some point here in the season.
Yeah. I could do an hour on OSU on multiple topics. And I won't. I'll just say, listen to Feels Like 45 this week. They will do a great job of breaking it all down. They'll be a little more optimistic than you probably want them to be, but sometimes that's a good perspective to have in these situations. And OSU will go to a bowl game because Mike Gundy is like a cockroach and that you cannot kill him. He is the Jesse Pinkman meme from Breaking Bad that's just, how does he keep getting away with this? That is Mike Gundy, and he'll do it again. They'll get to a bowl game and keep the very old money people happy and keep him around. Scott, I know you're going to have lots of thoughts on your show. Everybody go check out Boscoe's Boys, but let me hear what you got.
First, before I go any further, I will leave this, or Andy will have to leave this. Andy, I need you to pay for your sins. I went back and listened to it. I got the exact quote. There is a difference between DJ Giddens and the top tier of running backs in the Big 12. There are significantly better running backs all over the place in the Big 12. He's currently the leading rusher in the conference. Number 8 in the country in rushing yards per touch. Number 8 in rushing yards per game. And he has just at 100 yards receiving. So we can make this quick. I can log off. Do you want to go back on that? Because that has been sticking in my craw, because that is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard you say on the show. I've been waiting months to call you on your BS. So now is the time. If you want to walk it back, go ahead. Otherwise, one of us is going to have to leave the show. No, don't qualify.
No. Listen, here's what I will say. Based on the evidence that I had on the time, at the time,
more yards last year than Devin Neal. Better yards per touch than Taj Brooks.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
I truly believed that there was, that DJ Giddens was in a lower tier from the other. Now, obviously, I was wrong. Okay. Yeah, I was wrong. I'm fully willing to admit that. I say that every single time I come on here and I make, grand pronouncements like that. I am not afraid to make big statements based off of what I have at the time and what I truly believe.
Well,
that's what I believe. It's very clear.
I think it's very clear, and it's even more true now.
It's very clear that I was wrong. I agree. Again, I think that at least some of the credit needs to go to the offensive line, but you have to have a good enough running back to take advantage of what the offensive line gives you. And so, am I saying that anyone else could do what DJ Giddens is doing behind that Kent State offensive line? Absolutely not. There's no way. There might be a couple running backs in the Big 12 that could, but I don't know that any of them can mesh the way that DJ Giddens meshes with Kansas State and the way that that offense runs. So again, absolutely fantastic. I think he has been absolutely great. And yeah, I mean, I think at this point, it's hard to argue with him being the best running back in the Big 12 right now, just because of how productive he's been. And that, I mean, that's kind of the way it works. So look, I've hit it big with some of my big statements before, and I've fallen on my face before. This is one of those times I've definitely completely fallen on my face. I'll own up to it. I'm sure it's not going to be the last. I'm sure that Scott, at some point here, maybe we'll get to basketball season and you'll have something else that I'll say about the K-State basketball team that will get you just as upset. Although I highly doubt it, just because because I am completely irrational when it comes to football. So.
And look, the reason why I was so mad is because I did not think there was anywhere near the evidence you tried to claim to be so bombastic then, and now he has proven through the first 5 games that you're wrong. That's been eating at me since you said it. This was the first chance I got to confront you.
I will say it definitely was much more of he was much less of a household name in the conference. He hadn't been talked about by nearly as many people in the conference, and so it was a lot harder to just give him the benefit of the doubt, without, of course, then realizing that, hey, there's a bunch of other stuff that goes into this, why he could be much more successful this year than I was giving him credit for. And obviously I was wrong. Like I said, I mean, look, I apparently I'm new to this whole, college football thing. No, actually, look, this is just, it's definitely one of my worst takes in terms of, any kind of college football stuff. So, it happens.
Well, I'll move on. You definitely did, and I'm no stranger to being bombastic, but that one's been itching at me for the better part of a month and a half now. But to that game, DJ Giddens, absolutely amazing. Again, I don't know if it'll be him or Avery Johnson who gets the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. I think it should be one of those guys. Look, at one point, DJ was averaging over 22 yards a touch in that game. And he should have had over 200 yards just rushing instead of 200 yards just from scrimmage. He was the real deal. I think we saw a great game from the offensive line. Again, I think Oklahoma State, they have problems stopping the run. I think that is something that is going to plague them throughout this season. So we're going to see if they can get a handle on that, if that's going to lead to them being an 8-win team or a 6-win team. I know you're laughing, Phillip, but look, they somehow figured something out last year.
It's funny. It's like, it's going to plague them. Like, is that it? Just that? That's what's going to plague them? Not Alan Bowman.
Well, here's the thing about Alan Bowman.
Problem.
I'm not going to jump on a table for Alan Bowman because he's not worth doing that. But he is a capable enough game manager if you have Ollie Gordon rolling. And again, I was freaking out. I was having some flashbacks to last year down Stillwater where, I know he broke out a little bit versus Iowa State the week before, but he started getting rolling. I think on the game broadcast, they were saying that he might have tweaked something in his lower body. I don't know if that's true or not. He got a few touches in the second half before they tried to air it out. But look, I'm pumped about it. Avery Johnson, again, that was the best game so far of his career. And look, he had the opportunity to melt down just like he did the week before versus BYU. Again, being home crowd helps. Not, that BYU atmosphere, best away atmosphere I've ever been in. But he made a stupid interception, very similar to the first interception he threw last week. But instead, he turned around, had a big long throw to Jace Brown. He made an All-American style throw when he was rolling to his left, threw a laser to Jaden Jackson for 17 yards. The second rushing touchdown he had, where shout out to Jesse Ertz, he coined it the J hook, where he had a blitzer coming right to him, just hooked right around, ran it in. He can be everything that K-State fans hoped he was going to turn into. It didn't happen week 1. He's going to have some growing pains. We got 2 road games at Colorado, at West Virginia. We're going to see how he handles things on the road. But that game is exactly what the doctor ordered up to get the K-State team and the K-State fan base, get the juices flowing once again, because it was everything that we could have drawn up outside of the flea flicker, which if any offensive coordinator is listening to the show, run a first half flea flicker against K-State and a second one against K-State, you're going to score 2 touchdowns. So we haven't stopped that since 2019 versus Oklahoma when AJ Parker got an interception. every other flea flicker has been a touchdown versus K-State ever since. So dial up the flea flickers against Joe Kleineman's defense.
It'll get you one.
Hey, I'm taking notes. I'll send it over to Jeff Grimes later tonight.
Yeah.
He'll be relieved of his
I was
duties
gonna
before
say,
that game.
I'll send it to him and it won't matter because he hopefully won't be there by the time they.
Yep. Him and Jaden Daniels will be in the breadline before October 28th.
I'm not convinced they'll move on from Jalen Daniels at this point, but Jeff Grimes, they better move on. So.
All right. So I had an idea that I had before he tweeted it out, but then it just reinforced what I wanted to do here. If you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you are well aware of who Kelly Ford is. K Ford Ratings on Twitter, kfordratings.com. Kelly comes on the show on a regular basis. We love Kelly. Kelly has nationally fans follow him everywhere, but also like Big 12 fans follow him more than anybody else. But his tweet was, "Oh my goodness, all cap goodness, the movement in the projected Big 12 standings is incredible. Coming Monday a.m. as always, CC 1012 Network," because of course, drop your guesses in the replies for the updated matchup in Arlington, and the tweet's doing well. So I had wanted to anyways, and that reinforced it. I want to pitch you guys some potential Big 12 championship game matchups based off where things stand now. And I want you to give me your thoughts and kind of your percentage chance that it happens. Now, I want to make a couple of notes. We are eliminating Kansas, Houston, Baylor, and Oklahoma State from making the Big 12 championship game. This is because, A, they're 0-2. But also, I went back. Every year the Big 12 championship game has been played, and I went all the way back to 1996 and went all the way through to the new ones. Only 2 times in the history of the conference championship game has a team started 0-2 in conference play and made it to the Big 12 championship game.
Wait, how many times?
Twice.
That's actually more than I would have predicted if I'm being I guess divisions. Forgot about the division era.
Yes. The division. One of them is 2003 Kansas State, right? And that's, you had a quarterback injury for a stretch. And so they lost some close games because of that. And then he was healthy. And then they would play like they were supposed to, right? Quarterback injury. So that's your reason there. Utah fans are like, and 2020 Oklahoma
COVID
also COVID year. So those are the only 2 examples of a Big 12 team starting 0-2 in conference play and making the conference championship game. Starting quarterback gets hurt, finally gets healthy, things go right, COVID. So we're eliminating the 0-2 teams in the Big 12 standings from making it to Arlington. So goodbye OSU, goodbye Baylor, goodbye Houston, goodbye Kansas. All right. Arizona State's just 1-0. They haven't played another conference game yet. So I'm going to pitch you some matchups based off where things are. I want your thoughts on it and your kind of percentage chance that you think it could happen. Number 1, Iowa State versus Colorado. Scott.
Okay. All right. So first off, Bill Conley, he tweeted out percentages for conference champions earlier. So I'll be 120% honest with you guys. I'm cheating a little bit. I have that up. Honestly, I'm not a Colorado believer quite yet. Look, me going after Andy like that, there's going to be Colorado people who might be listening to this show who are going to demand, their pound of flesh with me if they kick our ass and they end up in Arlington. But I'm not a believer in them to run the table to get to Arlington. And even Iowa State, I think Iowa State has a good path, but if you're making me put a percentage on those 2 getting there, I would say maybe 9%, just under 10%. Just not a believer in Colorado yet. I mean, look, what was it? They played a TC or a UCF team, which is obviously flawed, and they needed a Hail Mary versus a Baylor team that doesn't look to be any good. So, I mean, are we sure they're good?
No, we're not. Better than we thought.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
Travis Hunter is, but I don't know about the rest of the team.
Travis Hunter's real good. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would give I would give this probably a little bit of a better chance than Scott does, mainly because I look at Colorado's schedule and I mean, yeah, they have the game against Kansas State. It's at home. They go on the road to Arizona, which I guess theoretically, like Arizona looks better than we thought, but I don't know that that's unbeatable. Real big questions about Utah at this point. And I mean, I look at the rest of the schedule, at Texas Tech, but Kansas and Oklahoma State to finish up the year. Like Colorado, I look at this and I think they lose one, maybe two, if unless they're just complete frauds at this point. But I don't think that that's the case. Like, I don't think that they're punching above their weight significantly where they're just going to be awful the rest of the year. And so you think maybe they lose, the Kansas State game and lose, I don't know, at Texas Tech. Like, that's 2 losses. All it takes at that point then is for them to get there is for Kansas State to find 2 more losses, potentially. Or I should say for them and Iowa State to get there. But like, I could see Colorado getting there, I mean, I think they, I could probably put 25% or so on their chances of actually getting there. And so, I mean, I'd probably say about 15% or so for Colorado, Iowa State. I think just the real question is, in order for that to happen, I think you do have to have Colorado and Iowa State both beat Kansas State at this point. If that happens, then this is the matchup that I think you would get.
All right. I'll give it about a 20% chance. Iowa State far more likely than Colorado based off of our expectations and what we've seen so far, but we'll certainly see. All right, number 2. BYU versus Texas Tech.
That wasn't one I had on my bingo card of one that might come up. So
look, so
it's on mine.
So Texas Tech and Bill Conley's model, not even a 5% chance of winning the Big 12. Again, this is winning the conference, not making the conference title. He has BYU at 8.7%. So I think that combination is less likely than your first one. I think Colorado and Iowa State are both far more likely to get there than Texas Tech. I think right now I would lean BYU over Colorado. So when you threw Texas Tech in there, I just threw it all out the window. 2%. I know Joey McGuire's pumped up, but he's still the team that should have lost to Abilene Christian. Still the team that got absolutely mollywopped up in the Pacific Northwest. I think they're a little bit more fraudulent. So I'm saying like 1%, 2%.
Yeah, I mean, I give BYU probably about an even chance compared to Kansas State and Iowa State of making the Big 12 title game. Texas Tech, though, so this all comes down to Texas Tech. I mean, because you look at BYU's schedule, they have Arizona, Oklahoma State at home, then at UCF, at Utah, Kansas at home, at Arizona State, Houston at home. The only 2 that you're probably worried about them potentially losing would be the game at home against Arizona, depending on what Arizona is, and at Utah if Cam Rising's back. Other than that, I mean, there's a decent shot that BYU might run the table and find themselves in the Big 12 championship because they've already played Kansas State at this point. Like, they don't have to play, and they don't have to play Iowa State. Like, BYU is probably the one I feel the best about of getting into the Big 12 without a serious, or getting in the championship game without a serious challenge, just based off of who they have left. Kansas State and Iowa State both have some worries there just with who's on the schedule. Texas Tech has to go to Iowa State. They're going to Arizona coming up. Oklahoma State's good for one random, we're going to beat somebody at home late in the season that they shouldn't. Texas Tech, is there the second to last week of the season. They play West Virginia at the end of the year. Like, and of course, Texas Tech also plays Colorado. So it's like, they've got a bunch of mines at the very end of their schedule that could keep them from having any kind of, chance of getting there. It's part of the reason I'm not even sure that's why it wasn't even on my bingo card at all, because I was not considering Texas Tech as a legitimate contender to get there. So I would probably give this one a 5% at most.
I will say, you're talking about BYU running the table. Sorry, Phillip, but Retzlaff has a turnover problem. Again, he didn't verse my team, and I had a very unpleasant experience because of it, but he did turn it over 2 times versus Baylor. He's averaging at least 1 interception and at least 1 fumble, whether or not it's recovered or not is different. But he's averaging one of those a game in his time as a starter at BYU. So anytime you have a quarterback that is turnover prone, college football can turn into college football. And I'd be shocked if they did run the table through the entire year.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't bet them to run the table. But if they only have one loss, they're in the championship.
Oh yeah, no, they're in. They're in if they only get one loss. I'm not going to declare I'm going to go to Taco Bell over BYU. But
right, like they have a realistic shot of running the table, unless Cam Rising comes back pretty quickly. Then I would definitely think that that's not likely. But the fact is they already have that lead by beating Kansas State. They don't have to play Iowa State. They don't have to play Colorado. Like, the rest of their schedule lines up extremely favorably for them to come out of this with one loss, maybe running the table. Like, it's hard to see a scenario that, unless BYU just falls off a cliff at this point, that they're not in contention to get there in the final week of the season.
All right. Number 3. Arizona versus Kansas State.
If it's coming down to these two teams, I guarantee we're going to have some tiebreaker drama because it was a non-conference game. I mean, look, as high as I am on K-State, again, college football happens and they have 2 back-to-back road games and then they have that final one, Farmageddon, at the end of the year. I would not put K-State's chances themselves any higher than what Bill Conley says. We have a 23.3% chance of winning the Big 12. I wouldn't go that far. I'd say we have maybe a 25% chance of getting there. What chance do I give? He has Arizona at 6.9% of winning. So again, look, I'd say maybe it's like a 15% chance they're both there. The chances of any given scenario you throw out there is going to be way lower than anyone playing along at home would probably do. But look, sign me up for it. I would love another rematch with them. It would be fun. I mean, think about the drama. 2 times K-State and Arizona playing twice, neither time counting towards like a conference record. That would be pretty funny.
I mean, I feel like a conference championship is a conference record, but
doesn't count towards a conference record. It would be a conference game, but would not count towards a conference record.
That's fair.
The battle for the scratching post for the Big 12 championship would be a
heck of a scratching post.
Yeah. That would mean they would play 4 times in 5 years, despite not being protected rivals by the Big 12.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, again, the question here is Arizona. I think that Kansas State has a good shot of getting there, just because I think, with the exception of that game against Iowa State, they'll probably be favored in every game the rest of the way. And so it really comes down to, is Arizona going to be able to do enough to not only get there on their own, but keep all these other teams from jumping into tiebreaker situations and causing some problems. So, yeah, I mean, again, 5 to 10%, I think is tops that you can go with this one.
Okay. All right, we need to talk about week 6. I don't need a long answer. You can't pick Kansas State.
We're on a bye week, so it's okay.
No. Looking at the standings. No.
Sorry, I thought we were doing what game are you looking forward to?
We will. We will.
I listen every week.
Before we get to that. I know. We're going to in a second. Last conference championship game matchup pinch. You can't pick Kansas State.
So,
which 2 teams are in there? Looking at where things are right now.
I think I'm safe and don't have to worry about picking my own team. So,
well, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to.
I know, but
they are eliminated. They are eliminated.
So, as much look. I'm going to. No, I'm not going to make that joke. It's going to make me sick to say this. Iowa State's in a situation that if they don't win 10 games for the first time ever, they're absolute failures and probably should relegate themselves down to the MAC. Anything less than 10-2 should be an embarrassment for them. They should cancel their football program. Matt Campbell should go coach Little League. But really, when you look at their schedule, it does lay out pretty well for them. Again, the game that everyone thought, okay, maybe a spicy game early on, KU. Look, we saw what Arrowhead looked like. It'll be 40,000 Iowa State fans in there, and maybe Andy, up in the press box. There's not going to be a lot of folks in that stadium rooting for KU in that one. What is Utah going to look like at that point in the season? I'm not ready to say that Cam Rising isn't going to play another game this season. But look, I mean, is he ever going to come back? So that game looks a little easier. Again, Farmageddon is in Ames, Iowa. I'm not going to make any bold predictions for that one. It's Iowa State. Iowa State has to be in there. And then the next one, look, I want to say K-State. I want to say K-State, Iowa State, back-to-back. Just put my heart to the test. Have baby aspirin on standby. But I am going to go with, again, as much as I hate doing this, and it seems a little weird after last week, I'm going with Utah. If you're telling me I can't pick K-State, I'm going to say Cam Rising is back after their bye week, and they end up going 7-2 in conference play, winning some tiebreakers, and it is Utah, Iowa State in Arlington, and I just don't watch college football that weekend. So that is where I'm landing for my one, because again, I don't think Cam Rising's out for the season. They got a bye week, and if he's back, all of a sudden you then look at their schedule. You look at their schedule, all of a sudden, who are they going to be underdogs against if Cam Rising's back for that Arizona State game? Nobody.
Fair. Yeah. No, it's the bye week comes at a very good time for them, and it'll be interesting. If he comes back, all right. If he doesn't come back after the week,
if he doesn't, no, if he's not back for Arizona State, then and again, you're not letting me pick K-State, then I'm saying Arizona. So then I'm saying Iowa State, okay. Arizona.
All right, let's run through the schedule.
Wait a minute, I don't get to pick anything.
Okay,
I'm
just letting the guests do
I want to know what Andy says.
Okay, look,
I'm a listener.
Right.
If it's a 90-minute podcast, I'll still download.
quick, caveat here. I am assuming that Cam Rising is not coming back. I just from everything that's going on, it's hard for me to imagine, kind of like Phillip said, until he actually shows up. I'm just going to assume he's not coming back. So I do not have Utah as one of those teams. I think the way it's standing right now, I would not be shocked if BYU has as good of a year as they've ever had, and put BYU in there. And then I would not be shocked if the second spot comes down to Farmageddon, Iowa State versus Kansas State at the end of the year. Think about this for a crazy scenario. BYU runs the table, makes it to the Big 12 title game. Iowa State is undefeated going into that final game. Kansas State has only the BYU loss, and the winner of Farmageddon wins the tiebreaker to get that second spot.
I'm not saying I will do this if that comes out. I'm not. So this is not me doing a Taco Bell.
I don't. Please don't say anything in regards to.
No. I was about to say this is not a Taco Bell declaration. I'm saying that if given the option to lock that in right now, and K-State wins that game. So hey, you're saying it plays out like that. K-State 10-1 going into that game. Iowa State 11-0 going into that game. BYU 12-0 waiting in Arlington. I think I would chop off my left pinky toe to lock that in. An 11-1 K-State rematch with the 12-0 Baylor, knocking Iowa State out, them thinking they're getting to Arlington. I think I would probably do that under anesthesia, not with a rusty saw. But that's the dream scenario for me as a K-State fan. Too many wins for Iowa State. That's my dream scenario.
Right. You either have a rematch of the honestly one of the weirdest games of the Big 12 that really showed us that nobody knew at all anything about the Big 12 coming into the year, or you have two undefeated teams in Arlington with an opportunity to not be the fourth seed in the college football playoff. So I think either way it sets up well for the conference, but it's one of those things that is so weird and so out there that I could just see it happening, of BYU running the table, Iowa State being undefeated, K-State having the one loss, and it all comes down to Farmageddon.
BYU Kansas State is called Provo at night. All right. Looking at the week 6 slate. That's how we end the show every week. Pick the game that you have circled as must watch this week. You cannot pick your team. Scott, you don't have to worry about it because Kansas State is off this week. Let's run through it. We get a Friday Big 12 game. Huzzah! 6:30 on ESPN. Also, these are all God's time. Central Time, folks. Even if the Big 12 does like to put Eastern Standard Time on their graphics now for some strange reason. Houston on the road at TCU, 6:30 p.m. ESPN on Friday. Saturday, 3 p.m. ESPN2, Oklahoma State hosting West Virginia. A lot of night games this weekend. This is kind of nice. 6:30 p.m. on Fox, Iowa State hosting Baylor. 6:45 p.m. on the SEC Network, Florida hosting UCF. 7 o'clock on ESPN2, Arizona State hosting Kansas. And 10 p.m. on Fox, Arizona hosting Texas Tech. In the I haven't decided if it's all West Texas Bowl, the Cactus Bowl, or the Tumbleweed Bowl. Y'all brainstorm this with me. Let me know your thoughts. 1012 Network on Twitter. Scott is the guest. You're up first. What's your game?
It would be the Tumbleweed Tussle between Texas Tech, Arizona.
Man,
that's what I would
That's good.
choose. But I'm great at this stuff. I'm great at nicknames. I'm great nicknaming stuff. It's the only talent I have in the world. If I could guarantee myself that I could do that late, but again, I'm usually in bed I'm asleep usually by 9:30. So do I have it in me to go back-to-back Saturdays, staying up until 1 a.m. watching college football? I'm sure as hell going to try. So that is my game. Consolation is kind of like it is loser, not leaves town because you're already out of town. It's loser slinks away and crawls into a gutter between West Virginia, Oklahoma State. Both those teams had such high expectations. I think the loser of that game could really spiral. I know Gundy always makes a bowl game, but if he loses that one, I might start watching out for the police with a bottle full of empty Jack Daniels down in Stillwater. So,
yeah, I mean that West Virginia Oklahoma State game, that has West Virginia on the road in the same kind of situation that Kansas was in when they went to West Virginia to Morgantown, and Oklahoma State is kind of in a similar situation as well. They both need that game. To feel good about the potential for their season to not be just absolutely awful. I agree with Scott. I think that Texas Tech and Arizona is the game this week, just because it's the one that has two kind of surprising Big 12 contenders at this point in the season. I think the winner of this game sets themselves up for a really good opportunity to make a run. But the loser isn't completely out of it, but we get to find out which team that's surprising a little bit is actually potentially for real. That and the rest of the games are either going to be complete blowouts or are just ones that don't really seem that interesting because it's two teams that are going to have issues.
Texas Tech and Arizona feels like a rivalry game. It just feels like two teams that should be playing annually.
Did they play in the Border Conference way back in the day?
Yes, I believe they did.
Can we mock up a trophy that has a tumbleweed on top for this one? Kind of like we've done with some of the other ones.
I mocked up one with a cactus before, and so I'll do one. I'll get one done.
Yeah.
I'll get one done. I mean, I made one for Texas Tech and Cincinnati.
Well, and you did the scratching post, right?
Scratching post, yeah. The Texas Tech Cincinnati was football with Tommy Tuberville's ears and hair.
So if you go cactus, it could be
was great.
It was the Tubber Bowl. Yeah, no, I'll make. I was gonna do cactus, but I think I might have to do a tumbleweed.
It could be the cactus conflict. Instead of just everything bowl.
See, conflicts works. I also still like it's
conflict. I always, unfortunately, I have that connection with the Connecticut UCF, rivalry.
No, is it?
Podcast being a visual medium. Rivalry. Air quotes.
Cactus combat.
Okay.
Cactus confrontation.
That feels like the spiciest game of the weekend, but it's at 10 p.m. So I will just to be different. I'll pick a different game. Obviously not West Virginia, Oklahoma State. I mean, look, it's nice to have some weeknight Big 12 games. Not that I want to. No, I'm taking UCF Florida because it is a in-state rivalry game. UCF's getting an SEC team. If Florida's butt or not, doesn't really matter. UCF is licking their wounds after that loss to Colorado. Now they've got to go to Florida. Can they go and beat the team that they hate the most, that treats them like they don't matter? And I mean, feel really good. I mean, this would be a huge one for UCF to go on the road to Florida, potentially get Billy Napier fired, get themselves a win after what happened with Colorado. And look, I don't care what happens to Florida. The SEC. UCF going and getting a win over the SEC is a good thing for the Big 12. Because after that game next weekend, we'll be done with non-conference, and I want to have a conversation of what are actually the 5 best non-con wins, because I think it's a hard conversation to have in relation to the Big 12 this year, which is going to impact playoff stuff if you want to get a second team in. So if UCF can get a win over Florida, 6-6, 5-7 Florida, I don't care. It's still going to be a win for the Big 12. No matter what happens. So I will take UCF at Florida. You guys have been awesome. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure, Scott, to have you on. Do me a favor. I mean, everyone should know who you are and what you do, but just in case someone is unaware, they woke up from a coma this morning, wanted to know what was happening in the Big 12 Conference, was confused why Colorado was back and why these other teams were there as well, because they've been in this coma for the last 5 years. Please tell them where to go.
Yeah, at Boscoe's Boys, there's an E at the end of Bosco, an apostrophe before the S. When I'm not holding on to 6-week grudges and exploding like a volcano that's been dormant for over a century, I am doing a 5 days a week K-State sports podcast, me and my dog Chauncey. This week, since it's a bye week, Monday, we have a review of that legacy Big 8 game with Oklahoma State. A much happier Q&A with the boneheads from the previous week. And then it's bye-week shenanigans. I have a whole episode dedicated to men's and women's basketball on Wednesday. Thursday, working on getting someone from the basketball staff if they reply to an email on Thursday. And then Friday, I have a round the horn with some fellow K-State podcasters. So it's a great time in the K-State podcasting world. So many great K-State fan podcasts. We have been doing it longer than any of the active ones, though. So proud of that and proud to be part of the 10-12 network. And I promise next time I'll just DM Andy when I have a 6-week-old grudge instead of waiting to be invited onto the show. But Phillip, anytime you ever ask me to come on, I will come on. And again, the boys from Manhattan Brewing Company say hello to you.
Hey, look, Scott still holds the distinction as the only K-State guest to make a repeat appearance on the Rock Chalk podcast. So, at least he's got that going for him. We like to get after each other because we are both very strongly opinionated and hold the opinions that we have based off of the information that we have very strongly, which can sometimes make for good radio and sometimes can make me very seething for a little while afterwards. But hey, that's how you know it's good, right? But yeah, no, glad to have you on here for this one, Scott. And of course, you and I have something in common. We both started talking basketball this week, so. I finally had basketball on an episode because it finally felt like there wasn't enough stuff to talk about. Like when the main takeaway from your game is fire Jeff Grimes, you actually have time in your podcast episode to talk about the basketball stuff that's been happening.
Love it. Y'all, it's been fun. We'll be back on Thursday to make picks for week 6. Who's the guest? If I tell you now, they will cancel on me, so I'm not going to do it. So we'll be back then. Enjoy your week. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.